Hi everybody, I'm Ezra Parzybach, cannabis consultant. I help people understand medical marijuana and I help people also in the industry with business consulting. You can find me on EzraHelps.com. So today I wanted to talk about the closed loop of homegrown cannabis. What I mean by that is if you use cannabis for medicine and use it for yourself, you buy from a friend, you buy from a dispensary, whatever that is, it's also unique in that you can grow this plant yourself, obviously, and create your own medicine. And then you can eliminate the price of having to purchase cannabis, the legality of purchasing cannabis, as well as eliminating having to go to a dispensary, having to be public about it. So it's really a beautiful closed loop, actually, and it's something that's been happening for decades, generations in this country, and hundreds of years, because people grow cannabis and then they utilize it themselves. In the States, we've been seeking to legalize it, but so many people have broke the law and taken risks because they realize cannabis helps them medically. And they've decided to grow their own in secret in their basement or in a closet or something. And we think of these people, we often hear about them in the newspaper. Oh, this person got busted, they had a home grow or whatever. Some of those people are growing cannabis and they just want to sell it to others. And so they're more of a recreational retail situation. But I'm talking about using cannabis medically and growing your own and creating more agency and intimacy with your relationship with the plant. And this is something that I worry a little bit will go away as dispensaries get bigger and better and have these enormous grows and can easily kind of create a sort of assembly line factory model for cannabis. And in states where people are not allowed to grow, people will never get the experience of that intimate agency, the closed loop of medicating and growing their own. So I recently had a few plants. I reached out to my email list and I said, hey, does anybody want any plants? And I was amazed at the number of people responding. And it occurred to me that we just don't have good systems in place. I live in a state, Massachusetts, that allows home cultivation. It allows people to trade and possess and cultivate and to even purchase. You just can't sell it legally, right? But how do people get plants? How do you actually figure out how to create your own closed loop? So it's also an important issue for me because in Connecticut we have a medical marijuana law, so you can get a medical marijuana card and then you can go to a dispensary and with your own money, because it's not covered by health insurance, you can purchase cannabis. But if you're caught growing your own cannabis, that is a federal crime, that is a felony, and you could do prison time. So I think this is unfair, and I also think it goes against what my personal belief is, that you have a right to produce something that will help you, and in this case that is cannabis, because it is essentially an herb that can be easily grown at home that can then serve your medicinal needs. And when people have their own cannabis, and they're growing their own cannabis, they're then keeping healthy and nurturing something that then feeds and nurtures them. So your relationship to it is a lot deeper. There's a lot more connection between what you need, what the plant needs, discovering various strains and learning how they affect your body in different ways. And over time, you trade different strains, you trade different clones, and you realize that there's some plants that you can grow that are more easily grown in your environment or your system, and there's also plants that have a greater effect on you. Even going to dispensaries or using a caregiver, sometimes the strains are rotating and you can't know what you're going to get. So when you do grow at home and you find a plant or a series of strains that are good for you, then you can complete that closed medical loop and have a consistent supply that you're producing yourself. So, so people ask me, okay, how do you get plants? How do you get seeds? Where do you start? How do you start this process? It's both very simple and complex. It's simple because once you have a seed or a plant, you can start growing. There's complexities in terms of producing, the best type of plant and creating really beautiful, well-prepared medicine. But that's just trial and error and learning your system and maybe having a couple of mistakes. And when you make mistakes as a grower, you learn, and then you can eventually get to a point where you're an expert. But acquiring seeds is also in that weird legal gray area. When we go online and we type in marijuana seeds, dozens of seed companies will pop up. And these are legitimate companies that are producing real marijuana seeds. And they're doing so in this weird gray zone, legal zone, in that one, they're not in the United States. So there are seed companies in Canada, there are seed companies in the UK, there might be other seed companies in Europe. And they say, don't grow these plants, these seeds. Now, that the seeds are for souvenirs only, and of course this is true for them. They don't want to get caught and they don't want to get in trouble. But a seed contains no THC. A seed is not a marijuana plant. So technically, you can purchase a seed. They can mail you a seed, and that there hasn't been any laws broken. That's essentially a hemp seed. There's no way to prove that it is a legal plant until it actually grows into something. And so what I tell my clients is, if you're willing to take the risk, it's not a very strong risk, because the DEA and law enforcement is not going to people's homes who've purchased a little tiny seed, right? So you can go online, find a seed company, enter your credit card number, they will mail you seeds, and then it's up to you to decide what you want to actually do with those seeds. But that is a great way to do it. You can study the strain, you can look at what they have available. I always recommend to get a CBD THC strain. If you're working medicinally with cannabis, you want to have a strain that has a wide spectrum of cannabinoids, and so start with a CBD THC strain. The difficulty is you don't know exactly what you're going to get. They will give you a seed, and you hope it grows into something that you want, but it's unpredictable. You don't know exactly whether it's even going to be a female plant. You have to have a female plant to produce the resin, the medicine. You don't know if it's going to have the right levels of CBD and THC that they say it's going to have. You don't know until you grow that plant and start it. But don't get impatient. The whole point is to develop a relationship. This isn't, we're used to going to the pharmacy and getting our pill and going home and taking it. This requires a more in-depth, you have to put your mindset into one of a farmer, because crops take a long time. It takes 4 months from that seed to get all the way to the point where it's harvesting. But in that time, you can learn more and understand the plant better and think about what kind of strains you might want to get in the future, etc. As far as getting plants, so the easiest way to grow cannabis, to make sure that you have female plants, that you're growing strains that you can somewhat trust that they're going to turn into either a THC strain or CBD strain, etc., is to get a plant, to get a cutting, to get a little, what's called a clone. When you clone a plant, you're taking a female plant, you cut off a branch, and then you start that in roots. And when those roots are grown, you have an exact genetic replica of that female plant. So you don't have to determine whether it's male or anything. You know it's that same strain. But getting plants is difficult. A lot of people think, well, okay, I can grow it legally in Massachusetts. Where do they come from? You have to remember that if you know the law, then you will sleep better at night. And the law says that we can all grow cannabis if we can have 6 plants as individuals if we are over 21. But you can't purchase those plants. So a lot of groups, a lot of people are doing what they sort of refer to as clone exchanges or plant exchanges. So if you have half a dozen plants and you want to try different strains, you can meet up at somebody's house and switch those strains. You can trade, so there's no remuneration, there's no money being exchanged, you're not actually selling anything. But there's some groups online. There is the if you go to Craigslist and Facebook, I know it may seem, geez, who do I know? I don't know those people, and I don't know who I'm dealing with. How do I trust it? A lot of how I've learned to trust people is you got to talk to them, and you have to have a conversation, and you have to say, all right, I hear you have plants. Tell me about them, and get to know that person. Often they are people who are just passionate gardeners. They really care about their strains. They know what they do, and they're more than happy to create a dialogue about how you might acquire them, those plants. There is a substantial and great Facebook group called Mass Growers. So you can type into Facebook, cannabis plants, type into Craigslist, cannabis plants. You can put an ad. It is legal to put an ad on Craigslist saying, I would like to acquire cannabis plants. I am 21 or over, and I need 6 plants because that's the legal limit. And there might be someone who approaches you and says, I have plants. Will you know exactly what the strain is? They might have evidence or documentation what that strain is. It's difficult to go and to know, and good to see you, Kyle. Kyle Kaczynski is the administrator of Mass Home Growers, so he's on right now, and that is a great way. Reach out to Kyle Kaczynski, go on to Facebook and go to Mass Growers Group and start a dialogue there. You have to be invited. You can request to join, and then they will have you join on. But when you have plants, then you can really, and you get plants from someone, then you're really in a position to trade with other people, to watch them grow, to develop a relationship with these strains, and to then really find yourself in the closed medical loop of home growing, where you're not having to break any laws purchasing anything. You're not having to spend too much money going to a dispensary, and you are learning what keeps plants alive so that they can help you keep alive symptom-free and without using harmful medications, and increase your life. So if you have any questions, reach out to me at Ezra at EzraHelps.com. I'll do my best. I'll probably just tell you to go check out Mass Growers on Facebook. It is a great way to learn what people are doing, learn the tricks of the trade, observe different systems. I mean, people who grow cannabis love to geek out on cannabis growing, and they know everything about it. And they're in the state, so they're doing what they do legally, and they have their 6 plants. So you do have to be a little bit bold and reach out. But I also encourage people who are over 21, who have plants that they're growing, to advertise, to say to people, look, I have plants. It's illegal for me to sell them to you, but once they get into your home, you can decide what kind of exchange is appropriate. There's nothing against bartering. It's just when money exchanges hands. So, you can, shovel someone's walk in the winter and get a plant from them. But I encourage growers to release their strains and to reveal to the world, to their friends and family, that they have plants. I have dozens of people on my list and clients who want to experience that closed medical loop of home growing. And so if I can put people in connection, in contact with one another, so that these relationships can start to develop, then we will essentially carry on the tradition of cannabis growing in this country, which is to have a small grow in our homes, to help our friends and family, to use the aspect of community, to make sure that we're using appropriately, that we're growing strains that are best for our ailments, where people have access to strains that are difficult to find, like CBD strains, etc. Anyway, that's part of my passion, and I love dispensaries. I think it's really important that legal dispensaries of every size are available to communities so that people who can't grow or do not want to grow can have access to cannabis. But the real tradition and the real aspect in the medical world that often people lose is that intimacy and agency with what is healing them. You get a little white pill from a doctor. It's hard to know where it came from, who produced it, what it's going to do in your body. We can trust the doctor, but sometimes these pills fail. And so cannabis provides the herbal medicine model, this idea of growing that plant in your yard, developing a relationship with that plant, serving your body, and making sure that that closed medical loop is providing agency and empowering the patient. So reach out to me. You can find me at EzraHelps.com. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next week.